everyone, welcome to the Yo Speaker series with Judy Heumann. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Hi everyone, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Welcome to the Yo Speaker series with Judy Heumann. I wanted to go over a few accessibility needs one may have before we get started. The next slide, please. There we go. Thanks for the patience. Alrighty, we have captioning in which you can access in the toolbar of Zoom. We have stream text in which a link has been sent in the chat. And we have 2 ASL interpreters who will be switching off today. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. Or maybe like 1 minute. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to the Yo Disabled and Proud Speaker series with the one and only Judy Heumann. We're so excited to have her. Before we get started, I just want to cover some Zoom accessibility needs. We have captioning, which can be accessed in the toolbar of Zoom. We have stream text in which a link has been sent in the chat. And then we have 2 ASL interpreters who will be swapping off today. Here I am going to introduce myself before we go over the some housekeeping. My name is Olivia, and I am one of the Yo Disabled and Proud volunteers. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and my image description is I'm a white woman with brown long hair, and I'm wearing a green floral shirt today, and there's a white wall behind me, and I have dwarfism. All right. So we have a Q&A option during the interview. If you have any questions for Judy, go ahead and access that in the Q&A button. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever. And then if the Q&A button option isn't an option for you, you can go ahead and raise your hand and our host will unmute you and you can just ask your question verbally. And then additionally, we have a chat going during the interview in which you can have a conversation. You can add questions. You could add your questions to the question Q&A button, but comments, concerns, or if you just want to chat. And now I'm going to hand it over to Evan, the lead of our project, to talk about the project and the speaker series.
Thank you, Olivia. Hi.
Wait, I'm sorry, Evan. I'm sorry. We are having an after party after our event, 10 minutes after our event, in which we're just going to talk about what happened. Anybody is invited. We have the link is going to be sent in the chat, and we're so excited to do that. It's our first after party.
Hello, thank you, Olivia. I'm Evan Milburn. I'm going to do my introduction first before I get into the speaker series. I am a blonde-haired, blue-eyed male, Caucasian male, with Apert syndrome, APERTSYNDROME. So yeah, and I will be doing my hang on the Q&A portion of the evening of the event. A little bit about the speaker series. This is our 4th monthly installment of the speaker series, where we invite disability activists to speak about their advocacy within the community and how the youth can get involved. Some of our past guest speakers have been Alex Warren, Nina Kame, and Rebecca Coakley. And we're so excited to have Judy Heumann with us today. But before we begin, I'd like to say a special thank you to some very amazing people, both on stage with us and behind the scenes. First off, our amazing mentors at the CFILC for sharing their wisdom and expertise and assisting us and helping us put this event on. Obviously, our guest, a special guest, Judy Heumann, taking time out of her busy day to come tell us more about her life as an advocate, what inspires her, and how we can help carry out her message. And finally, to our amazing ASL interpreters and our captioners for providing access needs to all of you guys. And now I'm going to pass it off to my good friend, Cammie, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cammie Marble. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a white woman with brown hair that's just below my shoulders. I'm wearing black glasses and a rainbow vertically striped dress. And behind me, I have a white wall, my blue chair, and my white lamp. And I'm going to be one of the interviewers with Judy today. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Tatum, our other interviewer.
Hello, my name is Tatum, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a white woman with long brown hair and bangs, and I have brown glasses, and I'm wearing a t-shirt that says love in both print and braille in rainbow letters, and behind me I have a wall that is yellow with pink and orange polka dots, and today I get the honor to introduce our guest, Judy Heumann, who is an absolutely amazing, badass disability activist, who her Twitter is at the Human Perspective, or her Instagram is at the Human Perspective, and her Twitter is at Judith Heumann. And she has done incredible activist work for the disability community and is really one of the reasons that we have access and rights in the way that we do. You can read more about her in her book, Being Human, and her other book, Rolling Warrior. And both of those I highly recommend. And in addition to that, a movie is being made about her Being Human book. And there's also a movie out already called Crip Camp, which documents the disability justice movement and the sort of history of the disability rights movement. And Judy Heumann is featured prominently in that. And so we are just super honored to get to invite her to speak today, and I'm super thankful for all of the work that she has done. So I invite Judy up on the screen to give her image description, and then we'll get into the interview.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Judy Heumann. I also am a white disabled woman. I am, however, 73 years old. I have brown hair, which is almost shoulder length. I'm wearing red glasses and kind of a maroon lipstick. I have on a green I think it's green, t-shirt with a heart, a set of hearts that have a person actively pushing their manual wheelchair. It was made by some disabled people in New York. And I also use a motorized wheelchair, which is black and purple. We're in the foyer of our apartment and have photos and sketches and plants and a dining room table. I'm around it. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Thank you so much, Judy. We want to start off by asking you, how have you been doing during this pandemic?
It's a very interesting question. So I think it's a question that's almost difficult to answer. So I'll just, give you random thoughts. My book came out, as Tatum said, last year. My book came out, the first book, in February of 2020. And the book is written by me and a woman named Kristen Joyner. Crip Camp came out in I guess, the end of February at Sundance. And that was an amazing experience. And then I was going to be traveling many different places in the country for the book. And then I was like taken aback like everybody else. I did the Trevor Noah show, and kind of the day after the Trevor Noah show, the lockdown began. And so I'm sure like absolutely everybody here, it was a very jarring experience. And because I also use personal assistance services pretty significantly, and I have two people who work for me in my company, Judy Heumann LLC, and it was affecting both of those people as far as, you know, people's concern about what should we do. So then my husband had been sick, and we were trying to find he's disabled also. So there were all these things going on that were obviously being impacted by COVID. And, you know, I think probably like most of you, we have done the best we could. And I think, you know, one positive thing is because of the book and the movie, and then a young adult version of the book that came out almost a month ago now, I've been doing many Zoom calls or Zoom presentations. So speaking to way more people than I ever would have been able to speak with, or to actually, than if I was traveling. And for me, you know, the distinction between to and with, I really enjoy seeing people, being able to touch people, listening to their questions, hearing, you know, and looking at people's body language. And you don't really get that on Zoom. So, and then I think, you know, it sounds a little weird saying all these things because it's not the way my life typically was. But the film Crip Camp was nominated for an Academy Award, and I did not expect to be going. But then, to my surprise, I got invited to go. And so I live in DC, and the academies, as many of you know, are held in LA. That in and of itself was a pretty jarring experience, you know, having really been living in my neighborhood and walking 3 blocks one way and 4 blocks another way for, you know, more than a year. I was very nervous to get on the plane. I was nervous about what was going to happen with my wheelchair. But in the end, it was really an amazing experience. I'm very appreciative that I got invited and that I went, because there was a part of me that thought, I don't know that I really want to go. But when I came home, it was kind of like an amazing, I don't know, relief or what it was, but that I made the trip and that nothing adverse happened. And both around COVID, because we were pretty much quarantined in LA and wound up having to do like 3 COVID tests. And in the end, it was really great to be with the directors and producer and manager for the Crip Camp campaign, Andrea Levant and Jimmy Lebrecht and Nicole Noonan and Sarah Boulder. It was great to be with them. And a number of people from Camp Jeanette actually came to LA. And so I saw them. So a long answer to your question. It's an experience that we'll never forget. And I really hope that we can get out of it sooner than later.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer, though. I feel like there is so much nuance for everyone. Like it's very, I don't know, you have to live during the middle of a global pandemic too. So that was a really great answer. And
I guess I think also I am worried about people's mental health.
Oh yeah.
And I think we definitely need, it's both mental health, but, you know, I had polio. And so if any of you know people who had polio, there was a range of how one got it, which is very much like COVID.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be really important that we can be in touch with people who had COVID and may have long-term effects, because I think, as many of you know, that, and I don't because I had polio when I was 18, but the transition of going from not having a disability to acquiring a disability, that many people really don't understand at this point. What effects are people going to have? Will they change? Will they be constant? What services are available? Will people have difficulty being made eligible to get services that they need? They're really going to need all of us at this point to help them individually and to influence the work that's going on around the country.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. That is like a huge, I don't know, just a huge place of importance that is not being talked about. So before we get like too far into this interview, we wanted to ask kind of, because we've read your book, we've watched Crip Camp, but we want to ask kind of, for everyone else, what events in your life sort of led up to you embracing disability pride and becoming an activist? Because our group is Yo Disabled and Proud. So like what sort of shaped that, and like what were there like particular moments or particular things that happened that kind of brought out that disability pride and that activism? Or like in Crip Camp, we see you as like a young woman doing all of this activism. So maybe it was just something you were born with.
You know, I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to be at the party together and have a discussion around this. So I feel in some way that I didn't have a choice. It's important to remember that I was born in 1947. I had polio in 1949. There were no laws protecting the rights of disabled people on accessibility, on education, on employment, on anything at that point. And so, first I found out later in life, when I was in my 30s, that a doctor had recommended to my parents that I be placed in an institution. I didn't know that until my father happened to say it to me one day when I was home visiting. And I'm like, oh, Dad, that can't be right. And he goes running up the stairs, calling my mother's name, Ilsa. Ilsa, isn't it true? Blah, blah, blah. My mother said yes. So I think I say that because, I'm Jewish, and my parents, we lost a lot of family in the Holocaust. My mother was 12 and an only child when she was sent out of Germany to live with a relative she didn't know in Chicago, where she had no other relatives. And my dad was sent out when he was 14 to live with a family in Brooklyn. And they never saw their parents again, nor many other relatives. So I think, the thought of them putting me in an institution, and the fact that anybody would even ask them that, given on the heels of what had happened during the Holocaust and even prior to concentration camps being set up in being really implementing the killing of millions of people. There were experiments that were being done on disabled people. And so that was one thing. And then when I was 5 and my mother took me to school, and the principal said that I couldn't go to the school because I was a fire hazard, but not to worry, a teacher would come to my house. And one did for 2.5 hours a week. So I think those, countered with the fact that my mom and my dad being supportive of my mom, they were continually looking at what they could be doing to enable me to live my life as they felt it should be. And they didn't want my disability to be something that was going to narrow my opportunities. So it's really what I grew up with. And then when I finally did start going to school, I was in a regular school building but the health conservation 21 classes that I was in were only for disabled kids. The school had no elevator. We didn't eat lunch with the kids in the lunchroom. And we only really did anything with the non-disabled kids once a week during assembly. And my friends and I, when we were very young, were beginning to talk about this issue as we realized we were being treated differently. And, those of you who had your disability since you were younger, it takes a while to really kind of understand that you're being treated differently in many ways. My experience was not only didn't I get to go to school, then finally did get to go to school with only disabled children, which wasn't the big issue because that was a positive thing to meet other disabled people because I didn't know any others at that point. But there was no learning going on. It was like minimal teaching. And all of those things, and I started going to camp when I was 9, another camp called Oakhurst. And then I started going to Jeanette when I was about 12. I think this lengthy explanation really, for me, is saying that I was gradually learning and being a part of a disability group. We had nothing like a YO or any of these organized groups where there was any money to bring people together. We were really doing it on our own. And I frequently say to younger people, don't wait for permission from an older disabled person to say you can do something. Learning is great, but if we would have been waiting for people to say it was okay, nothing would have happened because there really wasn't anywhere near the size of the movement that we have now, and it's still much smaller than it should be. But that's really gradually what happened. We spoke amongst ourselves. We looked at the civil rights movement, very influential. Television was really only coming out in the 50s, so we were beginning to learn more about the civil rights movement and looking at the demonstrations and how people were losing their lives and risking their lives for something that they believed in, their right to be able to participate equally in society. And that was resonating with us. The women's rights movement, the anti-war movement, which was against the war in Vietnam, and many of us were participating in some of those activities. I think, it's not that we did it with ease. When I filed my lawsuit in New York because I'd been denied my right to teach in writing, paralysis of both lower extremities, sequelae of poliomyelitis. I mean, for any of you who know anything about 504 or ADA, no bureaucracy like the Board of Education in New York City would ever write a letter of denial of a job. They might deny you a job for made up reasons, but they would not write that down. And that was the reason I was denied the job. And I went to the American Civil Liberties Union, who I just spoke with them Thursday and yesterday. And of course, people don't know that ACLU at that point refused to meet with me. They said that, in fact, they did not consider what happened to me as discrimination. They said I was denied my right. No, I was denied my job because I couldn't walk. It wasn't discrimination. I think these things are very important for people to understand. They still go on, but ACLU is like this major organization that we look at as lawyers who are fighting for the rights of people in our country. And yet at that point in 1970, 71, they did not see this form of denial of a job as discrimination. They would, I said, let me come down and talk with you. And they said, no, there was no need for me to come down. So it's incident after incident like that, where we were coming together and organizing all kinds of demonstrations, with lots of stories I could tell you. But the bottom line is, for me, it's always been kind of in me because I'm from Brooklyn and because my parents were very much like this. Don't take no lightly. Not all no's should be yeses, but we understand when a no is being given because they're being discriminated against. And it doesn't mean you're going to get it rectified right away or tomorrow or in a year or 5 or 10 years. But it does mean, in my view, that you individually and for me, and I think obviously all of you, because you're in this group, is that doing things together, sharing our experiences together, the good and the bad, getting support from each other, really is what enables us to personally advance emotionally, and then move forward in whatever it is we're trying to do. But it also is a great message for other disabled people, people who have not been a part of the movement, and for the bigger society overall.
It sounds like there were a lot of little moments along the way rather than a few really big defining things that changed who you were and made you an advocate.
I think they were both. And
Sorry. So our next question, which you kind of touched on a little bit already, was what was your experience being a part of the Crip Camp film? And then what was the experience being at the Oscars, which we know weren't actually fully accessible?
Actually, they were this year. They were fully accessible, including a ramp to get onto the stage. But because Crip Camp didn't win, no one went up on the stage. So Jimmy Lebrecht, who's one of the directors and whose idea it was to do Crip Camp, didn't get to go on the stage. People tripped over the ramp because they didn't even know it was there. But unfortunately, nobody got to ride on it. The Oscar or walk, ride on it. Sorry. The Oscars were amazing. The story about getting invited to go and then getting clothes to go was really funny and exciting. And like Jimmy had this great outfit on that was made by Gucci. And my outfit was, my shoes were made, I have trouble getting shoes. My shoes were made by a woman in Milan who never saw me. It touched me, because she was in Milan in COVID and did everything online and on Zoom. And my suit was made by a company in New York called Mark Arian NYC. And that's a whole other funny story. But I was very, very grateful and very lucky to be able to be there. What was it like to be a part of Crip Camp, the film? It was amazing. Obviously being involved in the filming, it's a documentary, and it was both, Jimmy doing interviews with me and then also going back in and getting documentary information. But I would say some of the most powerful parts of Crip Camp were when we went to Sundance. And so Sundance showed Crip Camp as the first film for 2020. That in and of itself was amazing. And I was and am so proud of Jimmy and Nicole and Sarah and their team for making this phenomenal movie. And obviously for the Obamas, Higher Ground picking it up, and Netflix. And when we were there in Utah, after the film was shown, a group of us went on stage because there were Q&As after each showing of the film. And there was a 5-minute standing ovation. And that was really very powerful. Again, my deep admiration for Jimmy, Nicole, and Sarah for thinking this up and putting it together, because it is an amazing job. And then I think the other issue with the comments and I was there for about 5 or 6 of the showing of the films. They had like at least 12 showings. What I think was very well, comments that people made were typically, of course, that they loved the film. That's why we got standing ovations every time it showed. But the question was, why didn't we know the story? And it's the same thing that I hear from people who are reading my books and Alice Wong's books and all these other people who are writing in other films that are coming out. People don't know the story. And when I was at Sundance, I finally said at one of the discussions, you're all documentary movie makers, or you are here because you love documentary films. And the question really is, how come you never saw the story? Yes, we certainly have not been appropriately portrayed in the media. We're not being presented enough in the media, but you see us in our communities. And the fact that there's been so little done, I think, is an issue that we're in part grappling with. People are beginning to see the importance of bringing disability into the media. Groups like DREDUF and the group through the project that we're working on to set up a group of disabled journalists, work that Jimmy Lebrecht and others are doing, bringing together documentary filmmakers and other organizations. That's all very important. So things are definitely moving forward, but the impact of Crip Camp for me and the books is really, what are people going to take with what they've learned? Both disabled people, what are we taking from what we're learning? Is it empowering us to feel like we have a responsibility to speak up and out, to work with others, to help others advance also and advance our movement? And I think that still remains to be seen. But I do think definite progress slowly is coming about. And I guess one of the other very important parts about Crip Camp and Andrea Levant and the impact campaign that she's been leading is their work definitely has brought the voices of disabled individuals with a much broader racial background than we've seen typically. And I think that's really very important on so many levels. But obviously, we need to be representing our community and the breadth of our community in everything we do. We need to see ourselves in order to feel empowered.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think from going to the Crip Camp Impact campaign and watching Crip Camp and reading your book, it just, I don't know, that's true for me and so many people that I know, that it just, it was nice to like recognize disabled people being like acknowledged for what they do and getting to kind of hear our own story as disabled people, and like what's been happening. And I wanted to ask you sort of, I guess, about the 504 sit-ins. So I do quite a bit of disability advocacy stuff, and I'm kind of like a budding disability activist, if you will.
You're not budding.
But
you are a disability activist. You don't have to say budding.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm like doing that work, and I whenever people ask me the question of, if you could travel back to one point in time, what would it be? My answer is always the 504 sit-ins. And so if you could take us in a time machine and bring us back, what I guess I just want to hear, what was it like? Like what you describe it in your book, and you describe it a little bit in Crip Camp, but I would just love to hear about like what it was like to be there, and what it was like to kind of hope for that community and like build that community, but like hope for hope for the 504, and like what being in that building was like.
So I want to say that I feel that we were hoping, that we believed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference. It's not that I don't hope for things all the time. You know, I hope I'm going to sleep later. I hope I'm going to eat less carbs. I hope I'm going to blah, 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 whatever it may be. There was something about not just the 504 demonstrations in San Francisco, but for some of us, we'd been involved with this like from 1972, when Nixon first vetoed the law that Section 504 was in. And it was really we were learning, you know, many of us had not really been involved in organizing demonstrations of this type. We'd been involved in rallies and, you know, different types of things. But what was going on with the 504 demonstrations was that we really decided a number of things. One, we didn't want to be just dealing with this issue of getting the regulations signed unchanged, doing it through letter writing or meetings. As it became clearer that there was a risk of the regulations being watered down further. So I think it's important to understand the process. So really briefly, the law was vetoed in 1972. Then Nixon vetoed it again. There were demonstrations that went on the first time he vetoed it. There were demonstrations when he vetoed it the second time. There was a big demonstration in Washington, D.C. That is a little bit in the film, but you don't really get, I mean, I know that's where the cuts came from, but it's not that clear. And then there was a period of time, a number of years, where the Department of Justice was beginning to work on the development of regulations, because the law itself is 42 words. They needed to actually have some amendments because the way the law had been originally written, it was going to be narrower than it ultimately became. But there were hearings and meetings that were going on around the country. There was a draft of the regulations, 2 of them, that had been sent out with comments from people. And, you know, as you all know, as the process was going forward, there were compromises that were being made, because the institutions representing hospitals, the institutions representing universities, the institutions representing any entity that was going to have to make changes in accordance with the law and regulations, they were not on the same page as we were. You know, we wanted things done quickly, and I think ultimately there was a balance that was struck that we didn't want to deviate from. So when President Carter, was a Democrat, came in, and the Republicans, both Nixon and then Ford, had refused to sign the regulations, and the secretary of the agency. There was a group called the American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities, which was started in 1975. It was a cross-disability coalition, and one of the reasons it was started was to fight for the 504 regulations and a number of other set of regulations that were being developed for other laws, which were dealing with discrimination and affirmative action. So the people in Washington, the chairperson of ACCD and the director, were meeting with people in DC, and were very concerned that the regulations were going to be watered down. And that's really what caused the demonstrations, because we just decided that we were not going to be in a position of further watering down something that people all across the country had really worked hard on. And we passed a motion at the board meeting that February with a date that said, if the regulations were not signed by April, there would be demonstrations. Now, the Bay Area at that point, Berkeley, San Francisco, and the surrounding communities was really the most well organized. Ed Roberts had been the director of the Department of Rehabilitation, and he had taken money and helped set up about 10 centers for independent living in California. And most states had no CILs. There were like 2 or 3 other states that had some fashion of what we were doing in California at that time. And when we were organizing for the demonstrations in San Francisco, there was a committee that was set up. It was representative from disabled people in the Bay Area. They were meeting on a regular basis. There were committees to organize like communication and coalition, and there was a big rally and many, many people who spoke. We worked with the labor unions, we worked with the women's community, we worked with farm workers. The Black Panthers were involved because one of the organizers of the demonstration, a guy named Brad Lomax, had MS, and he was one of the founders of the Panthers in Oakland. And so we also had many people. I think the rally had like a couple hundred people at it. And when we went into the building after the rally for a meeting that had been planned, so we were meeting with the regional director. It was not a bust into the building and have a meeting. It was a meeting that had been planned. The regional director didn't even know what 504 was. We were asking quite substantive questions about the changes that we were hearing were being considered, and he didn't know what we were talking about. So there had been many people who had come into the building, and I think what people really saw was we were leaving our rights in the hands of people that had no clue of what we were talking about. And then it turned out that the people who had done the demonstration in Washington, D.C. and had stayed overnight were not allowed any food, and medication wasn't allowed in, and they left. And not because of anything bad, but they needed to go because of the conditions. But we then decided, after we had stayed there for one night, that we were not going to leave. And if you go back and look at the film or look at the power of 504, you'll see that many people, younger people in their teens and 20s, really, for the first time, were seeing themselves as being empowered people. And what was it like in the building? I mean, we were keeping each other occupied. We had committees, and there were rallies that were being held outside the building for most days. There was a communications committee. There was a recreations committee. All types of things were happening, but keeping people informed, having people involved in decision-making was very, very important. Otherwise, why would people stay if they didn't feel that their voices mattered?
Yeah.
And I think we worked hard on that. And then about 25 of us left from the Bay Area and went to DC to join up with other people in DC. And we had many meetings with senators and congressmen and at the White House. And we demonstrated outside of the secretary's home, and we demonstrated outside of Carter's church. And I think, the work kept going on in the Bay Area. I think we felt very much connected. And we really felt that individually and collectively we mattered. That's kind of a summary, but I think it was one that at the end of the day, people felt that they individually and collectively did make a difference. And I think that's completely true.
That's really cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think we're gonna have Evan jump in to do some Q&A questions now. So remember to drop your Q&A questions in the chat if you have any. And Evan, go ahead and jump on.
Wow. I did not let my interview end, but I still don't let this interview end. But so you've been dubbed as the mother of the disability rights movement. And I just want to know from your perspective, how does it make you feel, and how? I'm just I'm trying to ask you, like, how does it make you feel, and what does that mean to you to be considered the mother of the disability rights movement?
I'm going to make a little joke first. It means that I'm one of the older people. So, but obviously it's very humbling. And I think it's a big responsibility. And, you know, what I always say is our movement wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for the hard work and commitment of thousands of disabled people. And that's something that we all know. You know, it's many, many, many people who play little and large roles that is allowing the work that we're doing to advance. So it is very humbling.
Thank you. And then another thing I want to touch on was that you and Ed were pretty much the pioneers that kind of helped initiate the independent living centers and the independent living movement. You know, I want to know, working on what the independent living centers do today. Are they doing what you guys set them out to do, or do you think this, to be blunt, do you think there could be more that could be done by the independent living movement or independent living centers?
I mean, they're like 400 or 500 centers and satellites. So, you know, I wouldn't come out and give an evaluation of all of them. I think there's some really great centers that are doing really good work in Boston, in Chicago, in Arizona, in California, in North Carolina. So I would say, like anything that's this large, there's more that can be done. I also feel that the centers need to be getting more money to be able to do a better job, both for advocacy, working within the communities, and helping to really address issues of discrimination, and really being able to provide assistance for disabled people, children, through seniors, so that people don't abandon themselves because of disability. We need to be much more integrally involved within the communities to really enable stronger, louder voices to be out there demanding implementation of laws. And, you know, we need to be believing that we have rights, and that in believing that we have rights, that we do what we need to do to obtain them, not just on an individual basis. I think systemically, the country is going through many changes right now, and we need to make sure, both through the Centers for Independent Living, but through many other organizations, that we are at the table. I mean, I think we have groups now like the American Association of People with Disabilities, which is a very important organization. It's not a service organization, but I think they're doing very good work, the National Council on Independent Living. And also, I think, you know, looking more internationally, groups like the International Disability Alliance, because the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which some of you may know a little bit about, is a treaty that's been ratified by 175 countries, and the US has not ratified. It basically means that our failure to having ratified this treaty is not really enabling us to be meaningful players on the international stage. And we're living in an ever-growing globalized world. So, I mean, that's another issue that we could discuss at another point. But I really think we need to strengthen the centers for independent living. We also need to really be getting more disabled people into a variety of jobs, which is slowly happening. One thing that I'm seeing a lot is I get invited to speak a lot to businesses where these employee working groups have been set up. And it's very interesting to see how many of them are new and are going through the same issues that we have gone through and continue to go through. People working who don't identify as having disabilities because they're afraid of being adversely affected by it. Companies themselves that are saying they want to do more, that have a lot more to do to make sure that the recruitment, retention, and advancement of disabled workers is actually happening, ensuring that things like technology being developed is really accessible. I mean, there's a huge amount, and one of the things that I think is so important about the CIL plus YO and so many other groups is we need, while we're developing and strengthening our movement, we need to be able to become a part of a much bigger circle. You know, when you look at how women's rights and civil rights, etc., really are advancing, part of it is because there are people who are Black and brown and women and gay and straight, on, who are in businesses, who are working in the nonprofit and the for-profit world. And those voices are really internally demanding better representation. And we're moving in that direction, but we're not there yet. And partly, I think there are definitely disabled people who are working in many jobs where they don't identify or they don't disclose or they haven't had the benefit of something like YO. I mean, I presume that one of the reasons you're involved with YO is because you get to meet other disabled people. You get to share your ideas. You get to explore. You get to have fun. But you really also get to be with peers. And you get, through some of these presentations, to speak with people who have not better experiences, but different experiences. And, you know, like myself, 73 years old, I've had a lot of experiences, but I don't, you know, one of the things that's very important for me in being with younger people is the issues that you're dealing with, while there's a common thread still, they are new and different. And being able to know what they are and being able to be supportive is very important. And I think our movement really is not as intergenerational as it needs to be. I think, you know, the majority of people who have disabilities are above the age of 40. We need you, we meaning everybody, you know, we need to explain to people that they need to be concerned about accessibility of the built environment. They need to be concerned about home and community-based services because they don't want to live in a nursing home, but they're winding up in nursing homes and other restricted environments because home and community-based services is not set up in a way that is enabling us to get people to work with us. The money that's available is too limited, on. So another long answer to your question, too, what do I think about the CILs? But I think I can't really just look at things in isolation, because I do think there are many centers that are really important change agents in their communities. And that's really what I'm looking for, is organizations that are run by disabled people, that are change agent organizations that the community, including disabled people, are learning from, you know, breaking down the myths of who we are and helping us feel more empowered to keep going forward.
All right, thank you. We only have a couple minutes left, but I really want to get this last question in here. How did how do you feel about the disability community and then in efforts of vaccine and efforts of planning a vaccine rollout?
I think there are a couple things. I am really grateful for the strength of the disability community, because if this would have happened in like 1970, there would have been very few groups out there to fight. So when COVID struck and the healthcare system was looking at who to provide services for and not, groups like DREDF in California, the Protection Advocacy, and the NICL and AAPD and many of these other organizations were able to really like swing into action. And were really able to very quickly go after the governor's offices and at the national level and really prevent, I got the hiccups, and really prevent something that could have been much worse. Now, I speak about home and community-based services, and those of you who know what that is understand that that's one of the reasons so many people have died who had disabilities, living in nursing homes, living in segregated living environments. And what I'm very concerned about is, are we learning from our experiences? Where, we should be seeing reduction in numbers of people living in restricted environments, and we're not. And so I think for me, it's how do we really continue to make people recognize that we need to learn from what happened with COVID. And it shouldn't be something that we just put to the back of our mind and say, oh, that was a terrible time, and forget it. We really need to look at what are we doing to force the federal government and the state and local governments to ensure that we have programs in place where people have places to live, they can move out of nursing homes into their own apartments, where they can be getting appropriate health care and personal assistance services on and on.
Well, thank you.
When was the last time I had a problem with accessibility? Oh my God. So personal assistance is an issue every day for many of us, and that still is an issue. And on a little not so funny issue, there's a place across the street that used to be an Irish pub, and it was renovated to be a sports, an exercise program. And it previously didn't have a step, and now they built in a step. So I'm trying to deal with how to get them to get a ramp, and that hasn't happened yet, but that's another thing.
Well, thank you for that. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Otherwise, I would love to talk to you for probably. We probably
I can just answer the last question quickly. Yeah, the last question is, how come I went to DC? The first question is, why to go to California? I went to California to work with Ed Roberts and to get involved with CIL and go to graduate school. I came to Washington, D.C. the first time because I had an internship that I needed to do, and I got hired as a legislative aide. Then I went back to California to be with CIL and WID, and then had an opportunity to come back and work in the Clinton administration. So let me conclude. Allow opportunities to embrace you. Recognize that you're going to have opportunities that you never anticipated, and be brave and do things that are uncomfortable.
Well, thank you. Now, unfortunately, that concludes all the time we have for these lovely conversation. But so just a heads up, in 15 minutes, we will have the next please join us as we have Dina Lambert from NASA join us on the 24th. And stay tuned as registration and time will be announced soon. And also, and as mentioned in the beginning, in 15 minutes, the youth leads, as myself, Tammy, Tatum, and Olivia, will be having a conversation to pretty much discuss all the gloriousness that's just went on, and all the amazingness that's just went on here. And that will be starting in about 15 minutes here once we all get water and a break. And so, but thank you, Judy Heumann, for being here, and thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really